I had an athlete several years ago that went to Beach to Battleship, and it was the coldest and windiest day that race has ever seen. It was like 40 degrees and windy. People were wearing their wetsuits on the bike because it was so cold. And we trained up for this race. I mean,
that falls under the crap happens.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another hands-free episode of Coaches on Couches.
Bing slouches.
We're like extra slouchy with the ottoman pulled all the way in.
A little extra here.
Let's get deep couch.
The comfort
sitting.
level. If we fall asleep midway through,
Matt will wake us up.
that'll wake us up.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about our love for short course racing. If you're watching live, we made these shirts, I don't know what.
It's been a while now.
A long time ago. We made them maybe 6 years ago, 6 years ago, at least, maybe more, 6, 7 years ago. And, we've always both really enjoyed the shorter, harder events. And we'll get into that, and we'll get into the benefits and kind of plead our case to you long course athletes who kind of swear off short course racing.
Especially the beginners.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But first, shout outs.
Gotta have the shout outs.
All right, so I'll lead off. Our boy Greg Rohde just yesterday hit his fastest mile split ever. When you're talking about a guy who last year, I think it was about this time last year, he was running a 9:30 pace, like on longer runs. And now he's knocking down 6:15 miles, 6:14 mile.
Nice.
For, it's a max mile, but still.
There you go.
It's come a long way. So shout out Greg.
A guy who focused on short course.
Yeah, he did. I talked him into it. And he's getting pretty fast, pretty quick.
Excellent. Who else we got? We got Allie Timms.
Yep.
The off-road series.
Yeah. One of our youth athletes.
Top 10 overall, and first in her age group?
First age group, top 10 female finish.
That's one of Coach Chris's athletes.
Yeah. Coach Chris has been.
And she's one of the youth young athletes, so she's progressing well.
Yep. Doing good
which
job.
Is great to see. And this Swamp Stomper.
Yeah, Swamp Stomper was last weekend, and it was pretty swampy.
Yeah.
And our guy we've been working with, Coach Chris has been working with, I worked with him a little bit, William Hennessy. Shout out William. He got second overall in the 25K, and then our buddy Doug Earthman won the 25K overall.
Good job to both you guys and everyone that went out. That's a fun event. And,
tough one.
Yeah, it was pretty muddy. It rained like all day Saturday, and then
there were some flurries on the ground. It looked like
got cold.
Yeah.
And shout out to the Merrill Jays over here.
Shout out to Brian's Merrill Jays.
He just came in.
Brian got these new shoes for early morning training sessions.
These are new team issue, man. These are team issue now.
They look like they're Merrill hiking boots, but they look like Jordans.
They're like some Jays, man. So we're putting them on display.
So shout out to Merrill for making some hiking boots that look like
non-paid
Jays.
Advertising for the old Merrill J.
Yeah.
Not actually their name, but we're saying it should be.
Yeah.
New name, Merrill Jays. All right, let's dive into it.
All right, so we're talking about short course racing and the benefits of short course racing. So first of all, what is short course? I obviously speak more on the triathlon end of things. But we're talking sprint and Olympic distance triathlon. So sprint being somewhere around anywhere from 400. I mean, you go super sprint if you want to, like 200-meter yard swim and a 10-mile bike and a 2K run or a 2.5K run. Sprint being usually 400 yards to 750 meters on the swim, and then usually 12 miles. 20K on the bike, 20K, and then 3 to 4 miles, 5K, somewhere in there on the run. And then even Olympic these days is considered, or intermediate distance is considered short course. With a 1,500 meter swim, 40K bike, and 10K run. So We're talking about the shorter events, excluding the half and full iron distance events. If you're talking about running 5Ks, even up to 10K, mile, all that kind of stuff, and then in the cycling, pain train. In the cycling world, that one's pretty loud.
That one is loud.
In the cycling world, we're talking more of like, criterium racing, 30 to 45 minutes.
And even a lot of the road races too.
Yeah.
There seems to be a big shift, less in the cycling world. I guess it's kind of getting that way, where, the longer events, if you start thinking duration above, that 5 hour mark on any of these, 4 hour mark, you start getting into that kind of what we would call longer duration stuff, where your training time really has to ramp quite a bit in order to perform well.
You hinge a lot on volume versus anything else.
Exactly.
So the benefits of short course, what are the benefits of racing short course, and why you should be racing short course, or why, these are kind of the points I use to kind of persuade my athletes into racing short course for at least a little bit of time.
If you're new to the sport, especially.
Yeah. Beginners to any sport should be focusing on the shorter distances. I mean, if I had it my way, anybody that I coached would do short course for at least 2 seasons before they did much longer.
Yep.
That way we have the time to develop skills and speed that we don't otherwise have if we have to put all of that time into volume. That's huge. So,
and the ability to just be able to keep things interesting.
Oh yeah.
If you got someone who's going from no training, not being able to handle any sort of training stress, to now they want to do, and we've had it before, people that want to do a full Ironman
out the gate.
They've never done a single event.
Yep.
Maybe have never even been in a pool besides splashing around and drinking a brewski.
Yeah.
But they want to go long course, and all you can really do with an athlete like that is focus on a gradual volume ramp.
Right.
And so you're doing a lot of sub-threshold stuff.
Just progressive volume build.
Get out and ride a little longer than last week kind of thing. Which
I'd like to put it out there that I don't dislike long course. I have nothing against long course.
You heard it here first. Dale hates long course.
I love coaching people to doing long course events. Especially if it's like a big goal that somebody's had for a long time.
Yep.
There's no better feeling, than watching somebody cross a finish line for an Ironman and then just be totally excited and elated because they didn't think they could ever do something like that. I mean, that's awesome.
Oh, for sure.
But a lot of what we focus on is keeping people in the sport and keeping the sports moving and progressing. And a lot of times when you get so into long course so quickly, the burnout comes because of the volume, So
I mean, we term it the Ironman hangover.
Yeah, for a reason.
Where it's really easy after an event of that nature with training that's got to be, so much.
Yep.
That afterwards you're like, oh gosh.
Yes.
I just need a break.
So when you're doing short course racing, there's less training time. Period. You don't have to go out and do 4 to 6 hour rides every weekend or 2 to 3 hour runs. There's a lot more time, and you can use that time to spend with family, keep the family happy, and there's just a much less risk of burnout and you just piecing out from the sport.
Yep.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many people, we're going on 10 years of coaching people, and I can't tell you how many people that I've had come to me to specifically do a half or full Ironman, and then when they get done, you'll never hear from them again.
Yep.
And they don't continue to do the sport. It's not that they just kind of focus on something else. They don't do it at all anymore. And that's,
or if they do start dabbling back in it, it's 6 months later.
Yeah. And
going from doing
all
something,
that fantastic
15
fitness
plus hours a week to now you're doing nothing because you need and want that mental and physical.
So whenever I take on somebody who's doing long course, the first thing that I tell them is my goal is that at the end of this process, you cross the finish line, we do the best time we can, and you don't quit.
Yeah,
That's it. If you don't quit, I know we did it right.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're
still excited to stay in the sport,
yep,
for sure.
Yeah. So less time, training means more time with family, happier family. Usually means your longevity in the sport is much higher.
Yep.
The other benefit is you can race as much as you want, within reason. You can race as much as you want, and you'll recover from it like quickly. Mm-hmm. You go and do a hour-long sprint try on a week, on a Saturday, and you're fine Saturday afternoon. You're and Sunday, like, you go and do a half or full Ironman, and you're probably not walking straight for at least a couple of days.
And there's a good chance that, at least the week leading into it, you're probably going into it lighter to freshen the body up. Yep. So now you're at least, 2 weeks essentially where you haven't really, done a lot of training really. You've got the race in there obviously, but. And
then you can ramp back into training too quickly. Mm-hmm. Like even if people who are still very excited about it and want to get back into training or train for another one or continue on training, there's a 2 week, recovery period from something of that magnitude.
Yep.
And your risk of injury in that period is much higher. Mm-hmm. So you can race as much as you want and you can recover from it.
Exactly. And just the experience you get from racing is huge. That will pay off if you do make the shift to long course later.
Yep.
Racing, learning how to race, being in that environment, dealing with nerves, running through pre-race prep. I mean, all those things are going to give you a much better chance. If your ultimate goal is long course stuff, if it's a half Ironman, full Ironman, practicing that and having confidence in your routine, in your prep, in that situation, learning your body, knowing your body is going to give you a lot better chance of success when you do transition over. And most people aren't doing a bunch of, long course events per year.
Nope.
A lot of people are targeting, one or two in a year. So you got one or two chances to show up on race day ready to rock.
Yeah.
And if you've never really gone through that, I mean, it's a learning process in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And actually what I wrote down as one of the benefits of short course racing is, we all want to pick a goal race and we all want to like pick a race to do our best at. Mm-hmm. But when you're racing more short course races, you don't necessarily have to pick a goal race. You kind of build fitness into like a general time range.
Exactly.
And then whenever the peak fitness happens, we can just race. Like whenever you feel like a beast, we can race. We don't have to be as exact on like the exact day and time.
Trying to get that week right. Yeah.
That you are in peak fitness.
Yeah.
And then if you don't have like, I always say like A equals anxiety. So anytime you put an A on a race, so that's their goal race, their A race, people freak out about it. Mm-hmm. Generally, it doesn't even matter if it's a long course or short course. People flip out about goal races.
Yeah, there's extra stress, extra nerves.
But
you want to have a good result,
right? But in the event that you pick one race or two races a year, and you put all those eggs in that basket, there's all of these things that can happen out of your control.
Yeah,
I mean, the weather. I had an athlete several years ago that went to Beach to Battleship, and it was the coldest and windiest day that race has ever seen. It was like 40 degrees and windy. People were wearing their wetsuits on the bike because it was so cold. And we trained up for this race. I mean,
that falls under the crap happens category, I guess.
Yeah, but you put a lot of eggs in the basket, and then there's certain things you just never know can happen.
Yeah.
It even goes for like, it's for any race, but you never know who's going to show up. So if your goal is even like, you have big goals of like placing in your age group or qualifying for Kona or 70.3 Worlds, you don't know who's going to show up that day. And you put all the eggs in that one race, and you may be one or two spots off just because a few people showed up that you didn't expect to to come. So there's just a lot of uncontrollables that happen when you put your your effort into 1 or 2 races. When in short course, if you want to qualify for nationals, like we can, if it doesn't happen in the first race, let's do another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's pick another one in a couple of weeks or whatever. No biggie. Like we don't necessarily have to put so much focus on one race. And again, that goes back to longevity in the sport. Like that keeps people motivated because there's constantly, we can constantly push little goals and like go to the next one, little goal, go to the next one. Whereas like for most people, pick a long course race, you train up for it, you do it, and it's over.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I want to do better at long course, but now I have 6 months between now and then. So it's just much harder to set those short-term goals when you're doing like races six months apart.
And you don't really get to test different scenarios. All your testing comes in training.
Right.
And training, I mean, you have to be a very focused, disciplined, motivated person to go out there and truly simulate your event.
Yeah.
Usually, for a triathlete especially, that would mean you kind of got to be solo. You're not going to be out there on a group ride testing your event. Whereas short course stuff, you've got multiple events you can do. You can test different scenarios. You can test, you've talked about it before, you've had athletes where it's like, hey, we're going to hit the swim and the bike as hard as we can and see if we can hang on for the run. Like, you can test that.
Yeah.
You can't test that if you only have one race each year. So learning what your strengths and weaknesses are, learning what works for you, what doesn't, is something you can do if you have multiple events. I mean, kind of regardless of duration. If you have multiple events, you can test that.
Yeah.
The issue we have with long course, which isn't really an issue, we love the challenge of it, but the issue we have with it is you just can't do that many events without really risking burnout, injury. So there's less opportunity to to test things.
Yeah, I like anybody who I coach that commits to like a season of short course, or even if it's fine. I have a lot of people who do mostly short course and then like end the season with a long course race. So we spent the whole season working on speed, and then we can take all that speed that we've gained and we build up at the end of the season for a long course race. It's a great platform, a great setup to have an awesome season. But I always love making people like taking a training race and saying, swim as hard as you can and see what happens. And the people who kind of trust the coach, trust me and do it, we end up finding that they can swim harder than they think.
Yeah.
Like in a race.
They aren't having to conserve as much as they thought they needed to.
Right. And for a lot of people that's like, let me just get to T1. Like that's their whole focus in the water.
Like for me it was like don't drown when I did mine.
For some people it is. Yeah, don't stay underwater for more than 10 seconds at any given time.
If the kayak comes over to you, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, don't flip over the kayak while you're panicking. But yeah, I mean, you can just try stuff. I mean, we've had people who are even strong in one leg, and we find out that they're really holding back too much. On the bike or on the run, they just think they have to conserve because that's kind of like you're delving out an effort over 3 sports. But they've never tested it. So we try stuff all the time.
There's no better simulation than being in that environment for sure.
When you race once a month at least, you can try stuff.
And you end up pushing. You can use those races as fitness building too.
Absolutely.
People push themselves so much harder in a race situation with the excitement, the environment, the other people. You end up pushing yourself so much harder than you would by yourself. So those can strategically be placed in training blocks to give you that extra training stress that you may not get if it was just, the end of a training block on your own. One of the huge things is building speed first, whether it be through targeting, short course stuff or first half of the season being shorter, faster events. Build that speed, especially if you're a beginner. like you talked about Rody,
Yep.
you know, ride or running 9:30s, and he just hit a new 1 mile PR of low sixes.
Yep.
So his amount of training time he would have to do when he's running, you know, say 9:30 was his longer run pace, but take someone who maybe brand new to the sport, they're running 9:30s. The amount of training they're going to have to do for a long course from a duration standpoint, you know, even if it's a half Ironman, is going to be a lot more than someone who builds speed first, maybe gets down to where they can run sevens. And now they're not having to run or train nearly as much to prepare for that event. So,
yeah, I would honestly say if Greg didn't, if we didn't shift focus from, because at first he wanted to just do a faster half marathon, and then he wanted to do triathlon, but if we didn't shift focus to speed and say, okay, we're going to focus, you know, at least a couple seasons on speed, there's no way he'd be as fast as he is right now. No way, because we would have had to spend all that time building volume.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'd have no time to develop skills. Like he took a lot of time even just to change his running mechanics.
Yeah.
And that would have never happened if we had to like just continuously build volume.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, there's a lot of benefits to building speed first, and then going into the long course specific training. One of the other benefits that I personally, maybe I'm cheapo, but you save a lot of money when you're not, you know, racing an event that the entry fee is $800. You know, so, you know, for the entry fee of a typical Ironman, you can race 5 to 8 shorter races, and you know, there's, you know, the travel expenses add up, but generally, if you're going to do a bigger event like an Ironman, you're there 4 days in advance, and you're probably going to stay maybe a day, so it's like, or a day or two. So the costs just add up for that one day. I mean, I think the two that I've done, I want to say all in, like with travel and everything, we were close to $3,000-$4,000, and we tried to make it as cheap as possible. I mean, the first one I did was Lake Placid, and my family's up there, so I only had to pay for a hotel for 1 night or 2 nights, and the hotel for 2 nights was like $700. Like
Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I'm pretty sure there was bed bugs in that hotel.
I was itchy the whole race.
But it was like all we could find.
Yeah.
Everything was sold out. You know, and the places around most of these big races know that.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to inflate the prices, and you know, it's more expensive to do those races. I mean, the last bit is, you know, one of the other benefits that we've put in there is that when you're doing shorter races, you know, anything where the time is like, let's say 90 minutes or less, or even 2 hours or less, nutrition and hydration are far less of an issue. It's not that they're like not important, but you have far less time to run into the major nutrition and hydration issues. You're generally not going to bonk on a sprint race or an Olympic distance try. You can, but it depends on the weather a bit, or even running into certain hydration issues. I'll say you can, because I've done it.
Oh yeah, you've done it numerous times.
But the chances are far less than when you're out there for, you know, 5, 6, 12, 15, 17 hours, you know, slogging it out. So that's just another benefit. Now, our plea to people who are focused on long course, again, not a problem, not a big deal, but there are still reasons and benefits that you should be considering doing at least a few short course races in your season. Some of them we've already mentioned, like, you know, just practicing speed first. You know, the get faster on the front end, work out the kinks.
Yep.
Like you can go and do, not every long course race has the transitions where you have all the bags and there's volunteers and on. Some of them are just traditional transition areas. Go to a sprint race and work on your transition. Try to lay out your transition how you would, even if you have extra food and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Use that shorter race to work out the kinks in your transitions and stuff like that. The big thing for me on long course is that I personally feel like long course has really hurt the growth of the sport. One is because of that Ironman hangover. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, where people come in the sport not really even knowing what triathlon is and what it can be to them, and they want to do this big epic adventure. Great, they finish it, but then they want nothing to do with the sport anymore, so that doesn't really grow the sport. If we have no short course races, there is no triathlon, because that's the gateway for people to continuously get into the sport. So if everybody goes into this long course and all these short course races die off, we don't have triathlon anymore. Eventually people are going to get tired of doing long course, and then as long course dwindles, we're just SOL. So if we don't have any new athletes coming in, there's no growth, and that's kind of what we've seen over the last few years is that the 40 plus age groups are ginormous, and the youth 16 to 20, 16 to 25, even 16 to 30-year-old age groups are pretty small. Mm-hmm. And then, 30 to 40 is hanging on there. But it's a lot of the same people. You'll see, if you go to a national event, you'll see the same people every year. But there's just not a lot of people coming into the sport because there have been so many short course events that have just gone away. Even locally, we've had several that just disappeared, and or some that are, on the fringe of disappearing. Mm-hmm. And it's just one less opportunity for somebody to say, hey, maybe I'll try that out and, see what that sport's all about. So if we start filling these short course races back with more competitors, right? So a race that might now have 100 people or 120 people, we know that there's a large population of triathletes out there, especially locally. So for a local race, when we know there's 1,000 triathletes in our town, for a local race to have 100 people is insane. Mm-hmm. So if those local races build back up, to that 400 and 500 competitor mark, the more competitors is more exciting. The more excitement built around the events, the more sponsors are going to want to get involved. And then it's just this really fantastic loop that builds the community back up. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're losing people in the sport locally, really, but everybody's shifted so much to long course that there's just not
don't race as much.
They don't race as much. Mm-hmm. You don't see the same social and camaraderie at events, mm-hmm. Whereas there used to be just huge groups of people hanging out, and the teams, every team has 20 people, at least, and if we had every team in even our area bring 20 people to the short course races, we'd immediately have 100 plus athletes in every race. Mm-hmm. So even on the tail end of that, you're helping by entering these small short course races. You're helping small business, which for us obviously is it means a lot to us as well because we're in that boat. But the contrary to popular belief, there's not a lot of margin in short course races. So a lot of the race directors these days who are putting on these short races are doing it to keep the sport alive, because it's a labor of love, and nobody wants to see the sport disappear. So we just need more people, when they're planning their schedule, saying, yeah, I got a local race that weekend. I can go to the local race, do the race, and then I'll just add some mileage afterwards. The races start at 7:00 in the morning. So, you're done by 8 or 9. And then you got, even if you're trying to be done by noon, you've got 3 hours to get in extra miles. Perfect example is a race that we have in Forest City, Arkansas. It's Mighty Might Triathlon. It's a point-to-point race. So every year, a group of us will go do the race, and then we end up running back to T2, and then we ride back to T1, and you end up getting in like a 2.5 hour day plus a race. It's a big training load. Even for somebody who's doing a half Ironman, that's a big training load for one day. And to have half of that be race intensity,
high quality,
bam. I mean, it's a amazing training day. So, the other part of it is we kind of talked about this too, is when you're racing short course as a long course competitor, you learn your limits. Long course is all about just delving out effort over long periods of time. So if you never, ever, ever know where the ceiling is,
where that line is, especially too,
you never know. Like, you never know your peaks. You never know, we have people all the time that'll hit, their peak 5K or their peak 20-minute power or something like that in a short course race while they're training for a long course. And then we're saying, oh, we've been riding your steady rides a little bit too easy.
Using short course for zone assessment is huge.
Yeah. So there's a lot of benefit there to learning the limits and adjusting your pacing and power and stuff like that accordingly, that you would have never, ever, ever, ever figured out if you're just out there steady state, just
more
doing
miles, more miles, more volume. Yep.
So the last little thing I'll add in there is, short course racing is just a ton of fun. I mean, I've been to a number of iron distance races. I've been to a number of short course races, even at the national level. It's like it just seems that short course is just a much more social environment. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Like, you go to,
because it's not everyone's A race.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because everybody there is not completely stressed out about what's going on. You go to a longer course race, and it's like, even just from getting out of the car, like, everybody you walk past either looks really stressed out or is staring you down. Like, who are you?
Looking for that age number on your on your leg.
But it just how happens that the community and social aspect to short course racing is a ton of fun. I mean, unfortunately, with the lesser competitor numbers at some of the short course races, post-race activities have maybe dwindled a bit, but there's usually free beer.
That's extra beer.
Yeah. Yeah. There's usually at least free beer. So
usually free beer, free food.
I don't see Ironman giving away free beer.
No? Man.
You walk to the finish line, they're like, here's some pizza.
Need to up them entry fees is my guess.
Yeah.
So there you have it. I think that's all we got to say on the matter.
Yeah,
we would love to hear, especially if you made it to this point, what your thoughts are. Are you a long course person? Are you a short course person? And regardless of, we talked a little more about triathlon specific in regards to this, but it can be applied to folks doing ultra distance running, folks doing, 200, 100 mile plus road events or mountain bike events, gravel grinders. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and if you have any questions for us on how to work this type of racing into your season, if you're focusing on long course, shoot us an email, shoot us a note. Get in contact with us, and we'll kind of give you our opinion on how you should work it in, or when are good times to do that, because there are times where, in the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks of leading into an Ironman, you're not going to waste your training time doing a short course event and call it a day.
Yeah.
There's ways you can work it in, but it's just probably not the best use of your time. But you've got, most people that are training for 4 to 6 months for a long course event, there's time in there to do some short course racing and gain some benefit from it. So, got anything else, Funson?
I think that's it, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us today. We'll catch you on the flip side. Until next time.
Until we're slouching it next week.
Adios.
Peace.